Brought to you by Moonbeam Multimedia.
This is 16 to 1, a podcast about education, teaching, and learning.
Hey. It's President's Day, and we're recording.
It is.
This is coming out days later.
Yeah.
So some of what we're going to talk about might not be current on the day that it releases.
That's true.
Which is tough for us.
We're in the middle of confirmation hearings for Secretary of Education named Linda McMahon. She's pretty controversial. It's hard to take any of the confirmation hearings seriously because some of what she's saying contradicts some of what the Trump administration has said they want to have happen. Suffice it to say, that's going to be an interesting news story if and when she is confirmed. By the time this episode comes out, she might be confirmed. We've already mentioned in our election debrief episode that dismantling the Department of Education has been the explicit aim of the Trump administration. It's odd to contemplate what a Secretary of Education is supposed to be doing in that scenario. But we're going to wait just a little bit longer before we bring you too much news about what's going on, specifically with regard to the Department of Education, because we just don't know yet.
So we'll get there when it happens.
Before we get there, we just want to remind you, go ahead and sign up for the 16 to 1 podcast email newsletter. It's where you can get latest updates, episode announcements, resources, workshop offerings, things like that from Moonbeam Multimedia. That is us. So I'm in the middle of my ongoing quest to try to be less doom and gloom and to try to look for the helpers. That's going to be my motto
I like that.
for the immediate future.
Mr. Rogers approves.
Yeah, Mr. Rogers would approve. But we do need to cover a little bit about some doom and gloom,
Unfortunately, my first article is a little doom and gloom.
I know, I'm sorry. It's hard to get away from it. But we're going to jump in with a discussion of Ohio Senate Bill 1. This is an educational gag order bill, very much like the one that we discussed at great length in episode 124 with Jeremy C. Young of PEN America. His focus is on higher education policy, and he spent a lot of time talking over these sorts of gag orders with us. So go check out that episode for sure. But now we have a bill that has passed the Ohio Senate. Tell us about it. What does it do?
Ohio Senate Bill 1 has been fast-tracked basically already through the Ohio Senate. It's already passed there, and now it's being taken over to the House. Our governor, Mike DeWine, has already said that as soon as it hits his desk, he plans on signing it. Of course, as most of these bills are built, and I think we even talked about this some with Jeremy C. Young in that episode, but essentially when you don't adhere to the requirements, of course, that means that you're at risk of not receiving your funding. And so that's how these bills are written, to be pokey for the universities and the colleges, because obviously they need this money desperately. So according to the Ohio Capitol Journal, quote, SB 1 would ban diversity and inclusion efforts, prevent faculty from striking, set rules around classroom discussion, put diversity scholarships at risk, shorten university board of trustees terms from 9 years down to 6 years, and require students taking an American history course, among other things, end quote. As I was researching this, there was a lot of back and forth on whether or not this is challenging the freedom of speech, because it's putting limits on professors, it's putting limits on classroom discussions, it's expecting certain things to be taught.
This is one of those cases that we discussed in that episode with Jeremy Young, where it's like so intentionally vague as to have, it's just a chilling effect because it's really difficult to enforce things that are so vague. And that's actually why, as we spoke with Jeremy Young when he was saying, there's less effort happening in the legislatures, state legislatures, because these things can be struck down because they are so unconstitutionally vague. So that is one hope that I have about this bill in Ohio. The governor has said he intends to sign it when it gets to his desk.
Well, and it's also going to require all of the colleges to publish a syllabus with the instructor's professional qualifications and contact information for every class so that it's public. And also post-tenure reviews, things like that. So it definitely has some witch hunt vibes, if you will.
Yeah.
I think as I'm searching through the tea leaves here, some of the news in the last couple of years about universities having professors join rallies or things like that and kind of sharing their own political beliefs is something that's kind of poking through here. It seems pretty obvious. All of that to say, Ohio is just as messy as we've ever been, and we're just leaning in. I'm going to guess by the next time we do an episode of the news, this will probably be through. That has been fast-tracked, and I think the votes against it were all of the Democratic senators and 2 Republicans, so I don't think there's going to be enough in the House either.
I think it's just sad that the consequences that people's material lives will be affected very negatively from these political games.
I mean, there were tons of professors who wrote in saying that if something like this is passed, they'll be moving out of the state to teach and things like that. And I'm sure that that will happen because they're not protected, they're not safe. And so if their rights are being taken away, I don't blame them. I wouldn't want to work for it either. So, all right, what do you have?
Okay.
Less doom and gloom or doom and gloom?
Well, this is an important piece of information, let's just say. You can decide whether
whether
it's doom and gloom
I'll
or
save
not.
my judgment for later.
Yeah, how about at the end of it, you can tell me whether it's doom or not.
Can't wait.
So, the AI hype train.
No, this is bad. This is doom.
No. I'm detecting some little... I don't know. I'm picking up on some signals that the train is slowing down. The hype train, a little bit. One indicator of that was how the markets responded to DeepSeek. That came from researchers in China that does what all of the big, flashy OpenAI type companies can do, but much more cheaply, basically. Mm-hmm. So that took a lot of wind out of the sails around the investment that was being poured into artificial intelligence. Because people were like, well, if they can do it with a 10th of the budget or 100th of the budget or whatever the heck it was, why are we spending all of this money paying OpenAI to give us a middling whatever? So that happened. Elon Musk made a not very serious or maybe a serious hostile takeover offer for OpenAI.
I read about that.
That was a weird thing that happened. So in the midst of all of this stuff, there are these research findings that are coming out. And one such research finding was from researchers at Microsoft, Carnegie Mellon University, and Cambridge University in the UK. They came together to do this big study that suggests that artificial intelligence might be atrophying our minds and depressing.
Like our muscles atrophy?
Sort of, yes. And I think that in the paper at one point, they even call it cognitive musculature. They're basically talking about it like you are. Yes. You exercise your brain when you do certain research tasks, and you're not doing those tasks when you're interfacing with a chat GPT type product.
I agree with that.
Yeah. So this paper...
Do you remember being in school and having like the most rewarding moment of when something finally clicked? Like where you used your brain for a ton of work and it like went really well, or like you got your project done, or...
Yes.
Your essay came together or whatever.
That moment of understanding can be really big and powerful.
But I've been chasing that feeling.
Yes.
You know what I mean? That's definitely something that I miss about being a student. There's far less of that as you get older.
Yes, there is. And I'll also
it's like a high that you're chasing.
It's also easier to find it, I think, when you're in a group learning setting.
Yeah, I agree
it's really
that.
harder to do it when you're by yourself.
It is.
You don't have anyone to share.
You're leading your own discovery.
Right. Yeah, you are. And you also don't have anyone to share in the excitement of it. It's just kind of like... you in a vacuum, and it's harder to feel the excitement of learning. But anyway, yes, I know exactly what you're talking about.
It's such a good feeling. That's what I imagine we're losing with the atrophying of our minds. That's where I was going. I can tell you how good that feeling felt without having felt it in a while.
Yes.
And that's a sad feeling to lose.
Yes.
Because I don't think there are a lot of dopamine hits that humans get naturally. And sometimes that was one of them, you know?
This is one of the dopamine hits that we should be allowed to keep getting. So the paper is called The Impact of Generative AI on Critical Thinking, Self-Reported Reductions in Cognitive Effort and Confidence Effects from a Survey of Knowledge Workers. That is a mouthful. We will put it in the show notes. The findings suggest that while generative artificial intelligence tools can reduce the perceived effort of critical thinking, it can also lead to an over-reliance on tools. And these tools, again, are by their nature not guaranteed to provide trustworthy, verifiable information.
Right.
It can cause an over-reliance on these tools and diminished independent problem-solving skills. The thing that you do when you use AI, they refer to this as cognitive offloading. Brain dumping the difficulty of thinking and research onto the AI, who then goes and does the time-consuming part, hypothetically, goes and does the time-consuming part, the exercise of research and knowledge gathering and evaluating sources. This is all part of forming strong and critically sound thoughts. This is how thinking happens,
Right.
and we're letting AI do it for us.
Right.
So They found basically that the more confidence that you have in generative AI tools, the less critical thinking you are doing.
I absolutely agree with that.
And higher self-confidence correlates with increased critical thinking engagement. Basically, it's just a bunch of research about this shift in cognitive effort, everything from information gathering to verifying to all the things that you go through with your students when they write essays in your class or whatever it may be. Just highlights the need for AI tools that are designed to support and enhance critical thinking instead of what we have now, which I guess I would say is really not that for the most part.
Yeah, I would agree.
Or at least we don't yet have an apparatus around these tools that teaches how to make them productive without doing this damage to our critical thinking. The other thing I thought was kind of funny about this article is that they're like, everyone has freaked out about these big evolutions in technology. Socrates freaked out about going from an oral tradition to a written tradition, and he said that that was going to cause our minds to atrophy. And they're like, people freaked out about the calculator instead of the abacus or the internet in general. I don't know. I don't know if those things are the same.
Those don't feel the same to me.
I don't know if they are.
Like, relying on a calculator doesn't feel the same to me.
Actually, that is the one to me that felt the closest, because not doing your math in your head and doing it with a calculator is, to me, the same kind of cognitive offloading as not doing the thinking and offloading it to an AI.
I guess I was thinking more like in the way of using it to check your work, something like that, which was usually how my math teachers made us do something.
Do you allow your students to interact with AI in that way? Do you have them feed in an essay and say, okay, AI, how do I improve this or make it better?
Never done that. I'm not going to speak for my whole department, but I don't think so.
Don't tell them to use it as a way to get feedback on essays and stuff.
No. We have definitely told them that using it in such a way is cheating.
That's a really hard one because...
It is a really hard one because they don't understand it well enough to make the appropriate changes based on feedback, rather than just copying and pasting it and turning it in as their own.
That's the critical thinking part, though. Yeah. That's the really unfortunate...
Right, and that's the part that I don't trust them with.
It's two-part, because they don't know how the tool works. They don't understand that what they're copying is somebody else's thinking smushed through an algorithm. I don't know. I think that the responsible use of generative AI is something that we very much have yet to figure out, especially in educational contexts.
I have pretty much decided that this is something that I don't want to be on the cutting edge of. I'll come back to AI in 5 years when we flushed it out.
That's kind of funny, because the more I have researched, the more I've used generative AI tools and other AI tools, the less impressed I am with them.
Yeah, I mean, I've definitely found uses for it.
Sure.
It's been great for me to use.
Okay, but here's my thing. I do tasks that require critical thinking. For all these reasons, it's not good at those.
Yeah, I guess.
It's not good at those things.
I think I've talked about this. I use it a lot to come up with essay prompts. And I'll have it focus in on certain things that I want it to catch.
Yeah.
About a certain text. And then I usually end up with 2 good ones, but it's some combination of everything else. And could I have written those on my own? Yes. But also sometimes I do get some decent ideas about things I might not have made connections. You know what I mean? So,
yeah. I think
it doesn't save me a ton of time.
No, it does not.
But it actually is kind of a good way to get my brain thinking about what I want my kids to be thinking about. So,
I find that sometimes I use it I have an assistant and I want to have a conversation. It can sometimes offer up things that I haven't. But I agree with you. The more I use it, the less I see it as time saving.
I will say I definitely see a difference in using it. So, for example, I'm about to start King Lear, right? Using AI for King Lear is one experience. Using AI for Angie Thomas is a completely different experience. So that's been very interesting.
Explain how they're different.
Just I would say the canonical nature of Shakespeare.
There's so much more training data.
There's so much more training data for Shakespeare. He's been around forever, this guy. And then when you do the same thing for Angie Thomas, who wrote The Hate You Give, but comparing hundreds and hundreds of years of information on Shakespeare compared to the last 10 or 15 years on Angie Thomas, who wrote The Hate You Give. Very interesting to see the difference in what it offers. So I would say that it's definitely more useful for me with my old dead white guys than it is for any more recent sort of work. That's all.
Okay. You want to move on to the next story? Tell us what's happening in New York.
So, proposed bill in New York about climate change.
I'm ready.
So this is called Assembly Bill 4876. and it would require all students K through 12 to learn about climate change in the state of New York. For the 2025-2026 legislative year, like our current year, this is already the fourth bill to be introduced to the Assembly that would require some type of climate change education for these students. The bill has been introduced with a requirement for the New York Department of Ed to provide guidance and resources for educators and relevant professional development to help support that learning. The passing of this bill would require learning every academic year that is appropriate for the age of those students. Districts do have some freedom to determine the way that this requirement is carried out, but it will still require them to meet the expectations as described by the Department of Ed. And there was also a couple of lines in it about those that are capable of teaching about it, which I thought was interesting. So they're aware that they're adding more to the stress or the load of a teacher, but also knowing how important it is. And some of the things that they want to focus on is like what humans have done to impact climate change and what humans can do to help climate change. But it seems that the New York Assembly is pushing pretty intensely since this is already the fourth bill of a similar type.
Are all these climate change initiatives and education initiatives going to come out of only the coastal cities that are most
like if
aggressively...
Louisiana did it, I'd be like, good. You know what I mean? Like
only the coastal states that are most aggressively impacted right now by rising sea levels. This is bad timing because I'm in the middle of reading this Neil Stephenson book called Termination Shock, and it's all about climate change and climate disaster and trying to mitigate the effects and how you can have ripple effects when you try to, for example, cool the earth back down.
So we'll see. I'll keep an eye on that one and see where it goes. And
I want to know what the curriculum ends up looking like.
Yeah, and I'll also keep an eye on the Ohio Senate bill one as well. Okay, what do you have for our last news bit?
Well, shifting into doom and gloom mode for just a second.
Okay, so mine was a little bit positive.
Well, this one's a little bit positive too, I promise. But I have to say why it's happening first, which is doom and gloom. Okay. So one of the most concerning things that has been happening at the beginning of the Trump 2.0 administration has been the either removal or deletion of federal health and other data sets used by researchers and policymakers across the country. And they took down more than 8,000 pages of federal websites and online resources. They took down tons of data sets that help researchers keep track of progress toward climate goals, track disease transmission and outbreaks, so like COVID and bird flu and things like that. Make all kinds of key data-backed policy decisions.
Sure.
Health researchers in particular are pretty worried about this. So partially in response to these deletions, but also maybe because it was part of the plan all along, I'm not sure. Harvard Law School's Library Innovation Lab has launched a U.S. federal data vault. It archives more than 300,000 data sets. Yeah.
It's kind of like our seed vault in Svalbard.
What?
There's seed vault.
Seed vault. Yes. I thought you said seat belt, and I was like, well, yeah.
Yeah, it's just like
the researcher's seat belt. It helps them feel safe as they research.
We love a secure researcher. Please keep yourself safe.
Data vault.
No, sorry. I meant...
Okay. Seed vault, yes.
They're in my head, they're all on Miss Frizzle's bus. Okay, kids. No, the seed vault.
Yes,
sorry.
it is like the seed vault.
This is like a data equivalent.
Yes, for information.
Cool.
So
I like this.
The U.S. Federal Data Vault, it archives more than 300,000 data sets from sources like data.gov and other federal repositories like GitHub repositories, code, stuff like that.
Okay.
I was reading about this, and there were researchers from several of Harvard's schools and colleges, and they all kind of came together. They were doing a datathon on January 31st, because that's when it became evident that everything was being taken down. They were just like, oh my God, scrape all the data.
Yeah.
So there was this big rush to preserve data sets that were being taken down. The purpose of the Harvard U.S. Federal Data Vault is, and this is from their website, quote, to download, sign as authentic, and make available copies of public government data that is most valuable to researchers, scholars, civil society, and the public at large across every field, end quote. In the announcement of the Data Vault, they said this is about a long-standing commitment to keeping government records and public information available. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of talk about preserving metadata and provenance. Can you guarantee the authenticity?
The paperwork that goes back to...
Yeah, your pedigree, basically. Yeah. The pedigree for this data, is it confirmed to be what it says it is? Is it been tampered with? That kind of stuff.
Can this data be found on like the Wayback Machine? Does it get scratched when it gets...
Some of the pages that were taken, the web pages, I think the Wayback Machine is just web pages.
The page.
These repositories can often be downloaded from web pages, but you can also independently, separately take down the data source from the web page. So, in a lot of cases. So, I don't know. It kind of depends, but
I understand that.
Some of those missing web pages might be available via Wayback Machine, which is an internet archive project to keep track of changes to websites. So, anyway, I think this project is really cool. I think it's a super interesting role of a university library to play. The librarians are hopping into action. They're doing everything they can to help us save ourselves from this mess that we're entering into.
The librarians are like, you fafoed yourself into this, people.
Yeah. So anyway, they do play a pretty essential role, especially right now, in protecting data, digital information that is disappearing before our eyes. So just want to highlight what I think are pretty wonderful efforts of the Harvard ecosystem there to preserve public data.
Harvard. Let's put that endowment to use. This is the fill in the blank portion. This is where we ask you a question. You write us at hello@16to1.com with your answer. We send you stickers.
Even if you get it wrong, we'll send you stickers.
We just send you stickers. And it's not a quick turnaround. Be very patient. Okay. I'm going to do the first question.
Okay.
Because the second one has some Roman ancient stuff, and this is more you.
Oh, okay. I'm more ancient Roman.
You're more ancient Roman than
You're
I am.
more...
I'm
weather
more
rodent.
Punxsutawney Phil than you are, yeah. Okay.
Weather rodent is more your vibe. Okay.
Okay, so our last episode's question. This was right after Punxsutawney Phil saw his shadow. Here in Ohio, we're feeling it. We got like 3 inches of snow yesterday. Okay, so in what year did Phil start predicting the weather in Pennsylvania?
No
1886.
Idea. Wow.
I love that we said 20 years after the Civil War. We're like, you know what we need?
A weather predicting rodent.
Yep.
I did not know that he had been predicting winter for that long, honestly. Okay.
What you got this episode?
This episode's question, fill in the blank. The month of February. It was given its name. It was an ancient tradition called Februa. Februa was the Roman festival of what? That's the question. Februa is the Roman festival of what?
Yeah.
Okay. What did you learn in the last couple of weeks?
Oh man, I'm about to get a little weepy.
You're going to get in your feels.
I don't know why. I'm not the only person that's feeling this way.
This story took the internet by storm.
I think we all needed her. Okay, so I learned about that sweet anglerfish and how she came to the surface and saw the light. The light. And saw light for the first time.
Saw the light. She saw the light.
She did see the light because then she died.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Girly Pop was seen off the coast of Tenerife and maybe the first ever recorded world sighting of the living adult fish.
Of the anglerfish.
Yeah. So young anglerfish and the larvae have been seen by submarines, but one has never been seen at the surface like this. These fish normally live up to 15,000 feet below sea level. At most, these fish will grow up to 7 inches, but she was much smaller. They don't know why she surfaced. She might have already been ill, or she had been chased by a predator and was fleeing.
Not to back up to your New York State Department of Education story, but is there any chance of climate change?
Yeah, so everyone was like, okay, well, this is a sign, right? Like, these are the end times when she's coming up here. A couple of things that I was reading were like, they really think that she was sick.
Oh.
And it just kind of happened because it would have taken her like weeks to come that far.
Yeah, 15,000 feet and she's less than 7 inches long.
Yeah, she's tiny.
Okay.
So this poor sweet girl let us see her and then she died. I don't know why I feel anything about this fish. I really don't know what it is.
Anglerfish are really creepy, by the way. They look terrifying.
I think, yeah.
It's because she's so misunderstood. Is that why?
I think she's misunderstood. And also one of the things was like, she finally got to see the light that she didn't provide herself. And that hit me. That like her last moments was seeing something that it wasn't because she was, God. I don't know. Maybe I'm feeling too much about this fish, but I learned about her and she got sent off to a lab to be studied, which I think is pretty cool. The odds that these people just happened to be there to see her is like insane. So it's actually pretty incredible that we even got to see this much of her. So maybe we should just be thankful that we saw her at all.
Indeed.
What are you doing these days? What have you been learning? Not about fish, I guess.
I've been trying to be in this habit. As we've mentioned several times now, the news is so overwhelming. What's happening in our country is so overwhelming. And I just need to not hear quite so much of that noise. Yeah. That doesn't mean that I am trying to ignore or not be informed, but I just need like my nervous system
You
needs
just
a
need the
break.
control of the consumption.
Right. So I've been trying to be intentional about less doom consuming, as I'm calling it.
Yeah.
So I've been trying to make a habit to go look for learning resources on topics that I want to get better at or care about, or I don't know. I'm just saying
that's cool.
It's a very normal human thing to do, but I've been trying to intentionally say, I want to learn about this and just go find
Videos on that.
yeah, videos
I
or
like that.
texts or whatever it may be. I'm deciding what I consume and what I want to learn about. I'm not letting the doom algorithm do it for me. So instead of getting depressed about the state of the world, I've been going and learning about music and audio production. I know that some of you know that I do the audio editing for the podcast, but I'm kind of a home hobbyist with music production as well.
I would say you're a very skilled hobbyist.
Oh, thank you. Well, there's all this stuff that I've always wanted to know how to do with my music editing, and I'm just like, this is a good time to figure out how.
I will say that your shift in that has helped me as well. I've probably consumed less TikTok in the last 2 weeks than at any point since I've had TikTok. I still go and enjoy it. I still laugh and things like that.
Yeah, I still want to see like dog memes and DIY home crafty. Like that's why I wanted. I don't actually want to consume the news and politics.
I think it's been good though because I've been watching more of like Men with the Pot, which is one of my favorite YouTube channels. It's the guy who cooks outside.
Oh,
I'll share his YouTube.
The like bushman camping.
Yeah, and his dog. But I feel like that has been a good shift. I'm trying to get back into reading. I like hit the ground running pretty hard in January, and then I fell off for a couple weeks. And Chelsea and I actually just went to our favorite local bookshop in Columbus. We have sung their praises before. It's called the Book Loft. We will share their link.
Support your local independent bookstore.
So support your local independent bookstores. I'll make a point. Maybe we can make a list of some of the books we picked up and just share them. That might be kind of fun, just to kind of show where our heads are right now. And I think if you look at our book stacks, you would completely understand Chelsea and I as people.
Okay. We'll share our book stacks from our recent
I think that would be
haul.
fun. But shout out to the Book Loft and all of the other small local independent bookstores out there doing the good work, being a beacon. It just felt good to be there and to buy from them and support them because these are fixtures that we want in our communities. So praise Milo Marcus.
All right. Anything else?
No, that's it.
Good to go?
We'll see you in 2 weeks. Who knows what we'll talk about then.
We'll talk to you in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Bye. Hey listeners, thanks for supporting 16 to 1. We're your co-hosts. I'm Chelsea Adams.
And I'm Katie Day. Find our show notes, archives, and resources, sign up for our newsletter, or get in touch with us via the contact form at 16to1.com, all spelled out.
We are so grateful for our listener support. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing to the show and telling your friends or colleagues about it.
The show is edited and produced by you, Chelsea Adams, and you're also responsible for our show's music.
And you, Katie Day, serve as lead researcher and social media manager.
Thanks again for listening, and we'll catch you next show.
Let's not flounder about.